And we've heard from all of our districts to really do that, a partnership and build capacity with the amazing BCBA, the behaviorists we have through AAI. So we've designated some of our SELPA money that is given, that we get our money from all of the districts. And as a priority, as we're building for potentially an autism regional program 2 years from now, and starting this work and this journey together, this relationship with you where you're going to come in and create ongoing PD, be available to even be contracted by the different districts with their service agreements too, not just with the SELPA, to continue coaching BCBA and really build that in that capacity of bringing in, Captain, we like to say our 28 evidence-based practices, but BCBAs, you go into so many different things. So with that, thank you for joining the partnership. Thank you for putting together at a very, very, very great price this amazing piece, because it's so important to you to come to us as well. Brian shared that with us. Danielle shared that with us before, saying, you know what, we're giving you a great price with 3 of us coming in. We're not even beginning to pay for what you're providing today. And thank you for letting us record it to get it out. And this is so exciting, the first of several, and a big relationship for next year.
I'm Danielle. I'm the Executive Clinical Director over at AAI, Autism Advocacy and Intervention. I have been a BCBA for almost a decade and was an RBT. It wasn't called RBT, but was a behavior interventionist before that. And I actually live in Los Angeles. So prior to coming on over to AAI a couple years ago, my experience was in kind of oversaturated, either in-home clinics, school districts, whatever. And I never, ever had the type of collaboration with school districts that we have in Lake County. So we're so thankful for it, and just the level of care and support that everybody wants to pour into, helping these kids and families. It's phenomenal. But I brought with me 2 of our rock star BCBAs. We have Junie. She's actually the director of, her title's Director of California, but she really manages Lake County. So she is somebody who's been in person, physically present at a lot of schools in the area, and is from Lake County. You were born and raised there, right, Junie?
Born and raised.
Born and raised. So she's got a really good grasp on kind of what the need is in this area. So of course I had to recruit her to come on in and help me out with this. And then we have Mariah, but we call her Mo, who's right there in the black.
Either or is fine.
Either or. I'm never going to be able to call you Mariah. It's going to sound weird. I'm just going to call you and I brought her on board because not only is she just a fabulous BCBA, but she has many, many years of experience with helping specifically in schools and school districts. So nobody better than her in our organization to kind of help push this project forward. So I'm going to hand it over to them, and we're going to definitely want to hear from you guys. This is so much more fun than a presentation to like 100 people, because we can really get intimate, and we can somewhat let you guys totally let you guys kind of guide what you want to know about, what you're here to learn, what excites you, what you already know about. So they're going to ask you all those questions, and let's go ahead and start.
I'm really excited to have a paraeducator here, by the way. I hope this is helpful, and I hope you feel free to ask questions, all of you. I'm going to share a slideshow, and well, actually, first, before I share that, we would love to know a little more about our audience and your history with ABA. If you wanted to chime in or send a chat with what your experience has been so far. Maybe none, a little, maybe a lot.
My name is Noelle, and I'm a paraeducator. I've been Lucerne Elementary for 4 years, I believe. And I've been working in the SPED field. I also am a preschool teacher. So I do work with the students starting at 3 years old up through 5 also. And so I actually can relate both to this job. And then I've worked with the AAI alongside. I want to say the past 3 years 2 years. The past 2 years. It started. I met Brian as the first person I actually met when I started. And he came in and would observe and everything. I do find it helpful to have the relationship with AAI. It's challenging sometimes working alongside so many different people, because I am a para, but I also work in special education under my boss, Kristen. And then I also have, with that I go under the teacher, and then I also work alongside AAI. So I look at it as a partnership, and we just kind of work together, and we're able to collaborate and discuss different things, and whether something's working, if one person observed something, the other person observed it, so we kind of just, work alongside.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes. And collaboration can be, sometimes bringing everyone to the table, and it can be, tricky, and something we'll talk about later as well, how to effectively collaborate with others. Yes, I see a hand.
Yeah, my name is Jennifer Adams, and I've been with Lucerne Elementary for 2 years now. And I have also, me and Noelle work with the same student. I work in the mornings and she works in the afternoon. So I also have worked with AAI for the last 2 years.
Jennifer, I had no idea that was you behind the mask.
Hey, you could never tell, huh?
You were probably wondering why I was so excited to see Noelle in person and said nothing about you. I had no idea.
It's okay.
It's good to see you. That's funny.
Wow, it's so awesome to have both of you here. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. And feel free to share more in the chat, or, just kind of come off mute anytime, but I will start sharing our presentation and get into what we have planned for today.
Lee popped in the chat and said she's a school psych, and this is her first year working as a school psych.
Wow.
Ooh,
that's
congratulations.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I'm not going to ask if everyone can see it. Apparently that's a meme right now. I'm assuming everyone can see this.
Such a hard topic to break, that one.
Yeah, I see some head nods. So, all right, so this is basically a training course in those initial behavioral concepts and applied behavior analysis, or ABA. This is our agenda. We hope to, we'll describe what ABA is, why it's considered medically necessary, how challenging behaviors are formed to begin with, and how do we select behavior for decrease or increase, for that matter, for any kind of change. We will talk about why behaviors occur, the 4 functions of behavior, replacement behaviors, and the relationship between behavior and environment will be a big one. We will also get into reinforcement, punishment, extinction, differential reinforcement, and then I'm really excited to talk about the interdisciplinary team, which is so important in the school setting, or in any setting, really. So what is ABA? It's simply the scientific approach for identifying environmental variables that influence behavior of significance. So my hope always when introducing people to ABA is to get you really excited about using ABA in every part of your life, of course, in the classroom setting, in your work. But once you learn more about ABA, you'll see you can relate it to all kinds of other areas in your life, with your relationships, on yourself, all kinds of different areas. So we look at the environment, and we look at what happens right before, during, and after the behavior, and all the events and variables surrounding the behavior. We focus on observable behavior. And so rather than what a person might be thinking, we look at what they are doing, and we can observe. What they're thinking and feeling is so important too, but we can't measure it. So we have to make sure it's measurable. in some way. So me talking right now is a behavior, and it's something you guys could measure. We look at how can we quantify it. So we measure it in different ways, maybe number of words I'm saying right now, all kinds of things. So we objectively assess the effects of the environment that the environment has on the behavior. We use these to apply these methods to decrease undesirable behaviors and increase desirable ones. We always do both simultaneously. It is considered the gold standard for teaching children with autism. So this is why a lot of children we serve, they have a prescription from their doctor to receive these services. It's considered empirically validated, evidence-based by the US Surgeon General and the American Psychological Association. And you'll see once you get to know more about ABA, you already are using ABA all the time in your classroom or with others, with your colleagues. So evidence-based just means that it has passed scientific tests regarding its usefulness, quality, and effectiveness. And empirically validated refers to the theories obtained through controlled observation and measurement of behavior. So we have countless research behind ABA. It has proven to be the most effective treatment for individuals with developmental disabilities.
All
Do you want
right.
to take it from here, Julie?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it. Thanks, Mo. Okay, so getting into the nitty gritty after these first couple of slides. So I do want to just reiterate what Danielle said in the beginning, that we would really love if this was interactive as much as you guys feel comfortable. We want to make sure that you're getting the most that you can out of this. So if you have questions, even while we're talking, come off mute if you need to and raise a hand, shout out our names, whatever you need. We want to make sure that if you have a question, it gets answered. So don't be shy. We throw around the word behavior a lot. Now, when we say behavior, what are we talking about? It's any activity of a living organism. It's literally everything that people do that can be measured. Behavior results in a measurable change in at least one aspect of the environment. Behavior and environment must have an interactive process with one another. When we engage in a behavior, it has some kind of effect on the environment. And the environment has effects on us. And that's, what can lead us to engage in one behavior or another. The occurrence of any event is determined by the functional relations it holds with other events. Behavior can be both external and internal activities. Like what Mo had said, us talking right now, that's a behavior. That's something that's external. You can see it. An internal activity could be something like, I have a headache. You can't see that, but I can sure feel it. And it's going to have an effect on my behavior. I'm going to be a lot more likely to reach over and grab this ibuprofen right here than if I didn't have a headache. Behavior must be clearly observable and measurable.
So you guys, most if not all of you, have probably worked with students or children or partners that have undesirable or challenging behavior. So does anybody want to come off mute and kind of give an example of what a behavior is? It doesn't have to be challenging behavior either. It could be a totally desirable behavior. And how you think it may have interacted with the environment. So maybe we can get a kind of baseline of what we already know about this interaction before we keep going.
Anybody?
Don't make me call out those of you who I've worked with.
So I would say an undesirable behavior would be like grabbing out and scratching,
Thank you. Good example.
And what effect does that have on the behavior's environment?
On the student's environment or just in general?
In general.
It's a negative effect.
Yeah, so in that instance, the student who's reaching out and scratching, right, the person engaging in that problematic behavior, that behavior is having an effect on that student's environment. So that could be the classroom.
Oh, right.
that could be the teacher, or the aide, or another student that's next to them. That could be a piece of property in front of them. It could be internal. Maybe they got some sort of internal relief from that. Like Junie mentioned, the headache, right? Like that's in the behavior of reaching out and taking an ibuprofen has an effect on Junie's internal environment. That headache goes away.
Mhm.
Cool.
So
Thank
like,
you.
I had a
I,
oh, sorry, cut you
no,
off.
you're fine. I was just adding to that. Like, so if the other children are observing that, it might make them afraid.
100%. These are all examples of interactions between a behavior, that one behavior of reaching out and scratching, and the environment. And they'll tell us more about how they interact. Thank you.
So some facts about behavior. Behavior serves as a form of communication, and we can kind of do the same, right? We can think about those examples and try to think, okay, so a child's biting, what are they trying to communicate? Because behavior does serve as some form of communication. It's important to think, ask yourself that question. What is the behavior communicating? Behavior can be both good and bad, like Deborah was explaining, can be good and bad. Or in other words, it can be behaviors that we want to see happening. We get super stoked when we see them. Or they can be on the other end where they're behaviors that we want to see reduce or go away. Behavior can be both verbal and nonverbal. So me talking, communicating, or nonverbal, like a wave as an example, or throwing, I'm going to throw my pen. So getting into a little bit more of challenging behaviors specifically, how are challenging behaviors formed? So like Deborah's example, biting, or the other example, reaching out and scratching maybe. How does that happen? How do we get to that point? Well, challenging behaviors are shaped and learned through the person's own learning history. So at some point, there was that first bite, and the response from the environment was something that worked for that person. There was some kind of payoff for them that led them to learn, well, if I bite, then something's going to happen. Challenging behaviors occur because of the following possible reasons. One reason, a person's trying to get their wants and needs met. So I think we all can probably think of a student that maybe has a very limited repertoire for vocal communication. Maybe they're using PECs, but they haven't quite learned that fluently yet, for example, and biting or another challenging behavior, they've learned that those challenging behaviors can get their wants and needs met a little bit quicker because that's just what they've learned over time, right? Another example, a person does not yet have the skills to use an appropriate way to communicate his or her needs. They might just still be at the spot where they need some support and learning some functional communication. Engaging in challenging behavior in the past has resulted in a desirable outcome. Number 4, a person engages in any behavior that in the past was successful, regardless of the impact that behavior might have on their environment. If it worked, right? Challenging behaviors often result in faster responses from others. So I think we can probably see it all around us, right? We can probably even think, I know I can think back on myself and, my own kids as a mom. I can think back to a really big tantrum in somewhere like a grocery store. Maybe my son wanted a piece of candy and all of a sudden I said no, and this big, huge explosion of a tantrum happened. What's going to stop that tantrum quickest? Probably to give in and give him the candy. So that's another example of how challenging behaviors can come about to be formed.
So when we're looking at behavior change, we can apply this to any and all behaviors. For behaviors that we want to decrease, like whining, tantruming, whatever it may be, or behaviors for increase. And we focus on changing behaviors. This is really important, that will have social significance to the individual and to the classroom. So we're not just choosing a behavior if it's merely annoying, or something that's not impacting anyone negatively. It has to have some kind of social significance. So a child who's throwing items in the classroom, that's a problem. So we'll need to treat that behavior. The principles and methods of behavior analysis have been effectively applied in many circumstances to develop a wide range of skills and learners with and without developmental disabilities. So we can use these principles in any classroom with anyone. What we seek to demonstrate is a reliable relationship between the intervention and the improvements in behavior through ongoing data collection and analysis to make sure that what we're recommending or what we're changing in the environment is actually having the desired effect. So why does behavior occur in the first place? Like we kind of talked about a couple slides ago, good and bad behaviors are strengthened by either getting something or getting out of something. In order to change behavior, we need to know why the person engages in the behavior in the first place. What is the payoff for them? What makes them want to do it? Something is working for them. That's why they continue to engage in that behavior. So how do we select a behavior? And I'd love for you guys to chime in here too, if you think of any behavior specifically that matches these, or maybe behavior that doesn't match this that you're curious about, we could talk about. So social significance. So is the behavior change relevant? Does the child have the prerequisite skills? So a child, we may want him to ask for attention appropriately by saying the teacher's name, but maybe first we need to teach him to non-vocally request attention, maybe by raising his hand or a different way if he's not quite ready yet. Will the behavior change lead to access to new environments where other important behaviors can be learned? We want our kids to be able to go to the grocery store, go to community events, go anywhere and everywhere that they would like to go so they can learn from other children, other adults, other people. And will the behavior change lead to the child interacting more with others? Is the target behavior a building block to learning more complex skills? Well, we'll get back to that. But and also, is the target behavior age appropriate? So we need to be careful we're not holding the kids that we work with and serve to a higher standard than other kids their age, and meet them where they're at. So we take baby steps towards teaching them the desired skill and make sure that our expectations are attainable right off the bat. So, and then how do we prioritize behavior? So sometimes we have kids where there's, 5 different behaviors that are a problem in the classroom or at home. And we need to figure out, okay, we kind of need to pick our battles, I guess. We need to figure out which one is the most important one to treat right now. So we look at the severity, or is it dangerous to himself or others? Is he biting himself? He or she is, are they hitting others? Are they engaging in behavior that's dangerous? How often does it occur? So if it only happens once a month, that might be a little trickier than treating a behavior that happens every day, all day, and that might be what we need to treat first. Will changing the behavior result in increased opportunity to reinforcement? So we want to make sure that, with all these behaviors, the child is trying to access something, maybe it's attention or whatever it is that they need, and we want them to access that. We want them to access it in a different way. Will the behavior change allow for future skill development and independence? We always want, of course, least restrictive environment for our kids and increased independence. And will the behavior change relieve stress for the family or environment? Does anyone have any questions? Sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
Oh, no, sorry. I was going to say, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that most of you probably don't actually create the behavior plans or select the behaviors, right? You get a BIP or behavior intervention plan from another person you're collaborating with. and you're expected to just kind of implement it. But the reason why it's important for you guys to, everybody who works with a child with challenging behavior or a skill deficit, to understand how behavior selected and prioritized for change is because you guys are the ones working with the child. So if you have, even if you have a BCBA, right, a board certified behavior analyst who works just for your school or your school district, they are not with the child as much as the teacher is, who might not even be as much with the child as the paraprofessional, right? So we need you guys to be aware of what behavior is considered to be important to target for reduction or good behavior for increase, so that you can support whoever on your team is designing the behavior treatment.
Thanks, Danielle. Could I ask a question? Actually, my district, I mean, it sounds like it's an option now, but we pretty much, the special ed teachers are writing the behavior plans at this point. And my question is kind of for the BCBAs and the people at your company, because it sounds like you work with schools a lot, and just looking at this question of like what behaviors you select, it's very subjective, like to figure out what behavior change is relevant. And a lot of these, you could probably ask those kinds of questions about every single stage. And I'm wondering, like, we're generally directed by the concerns of the IEP team. And I know you probably also work outside of the schools, maybe just with parents. And I think that parents probably have really different answers to these questions about what's important to them and what kind of social interactions they are interested in their kids having. Even like you get a lot of people with strong negative reactions to ABA from the autism community, who just look at this like this is, trying to change someone, some social behavior is wrong because it's, their social behavior is who they are and so forth. So it is, I know that, we're trying to be, or the goal is to be very methodical and concise about what we're doing when we're trying to influence behavior. And I'm wondering what your thoughts were as far as that. Like, perhaps, what do you do when you have a parent who has something that perhaps you personally disagree with? Say that you find that like a child stimming is harmless or is helping them get through the day, but you might have a parent who really doesn't want to see their child stick out in any way. And I was just wondering, like, what your, like, I know we're going through like kind of the basics of ABA, but I'm curious about your own experiences with struggling with these questions, especially when you don't have like a legal mandate of an IEP or something to guide you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the points. You touched on a lot of really important points. And I love that you're bringing all of this up. The first thing that comes to mind is when we're at that IEP table and we're talking about, there's these challenges and how do we move forward? Our first question is, what are the challenges? And it's really important working together as a team for everyone around the table to have those open ears to hear all the different perspectives and hear, from the parents, from the teacher, from the para, from the OT, from the speech, from the BCBA that maybe only has worked with the child at home, maybe is at the IEP table, but hasn't had access to the classroom yet, right? To all be able to put it out on the table. Here's the behaviors, and then be able to listen to one another. And for us, I personally, I have had experience, I think we all have, with stemming, and maybe a parent is concerned and they're concerned about my child stemming in the classroom. What effect will that have socially? And our response is to keep it as objective as possible. Go in, have some data to demonstrate to that parent. We don't come forward with our own personal opinions. we don't come forward with, subjective information. We keep it objective. If you're, maybe you're noticing that the stemming happens and we have the data to demonstrate, here is the antecedent, here's what's happening in the environment, here's the behavior, here's what's happening after. Consistently, mom and dad, it looks like, this behavior is working kind of in their favor. Maybe it's showing signs that they are calming down. What do you think?
Thanks.
Yeah, and the other thing that, and we're gonna touch on it too later, but we are never ever, as behavior analysts, trying to change who a person is or what needs they have that they need to get met, right? We're just trying to give them a more functional way to get their needs met. You don't have to bite your friend to indicate that you want to play with them. Here's a skill we're going to teach you instead. You don't have to stop stimming, right? You have a sensory need that we can't possibly understand. Go for it. Here's a way we're going to help you get that need met that is not disruptive to the other students in the classroom or to your own learning experience, right? And sometimes that's a little trial and error, but the very difficult thing is, and I bet we've all had experience with it, is when a parent comes to the table and is very strongly advocating for something that you personally don't find to be a priority, or you find that it is age appropriate and they're like, but I still don't want this to be happening, or whatever it is. And like Junie said, as professionals, and I'm not just talking about behavior analysts, I'm talking about all of us as professionals, our response has to be objective. So it's very, very much in behavior, we're all about data. So presenting the data, what intervent to demonstrate how certain techniques are working or not working, but also this, right? Like, well, here, mom and dad, let me tell you how we typically would select a behavior for change. Let me tell you what I'm recommending go in the IEP. Here's, however, your child better than anybody, and that parent's a part of the team too. And we've all been, I don't want to use this word, but it's true, stuck in a position where we have to put something into an IEP or into a treatment plan that we don't necessarily agree with because the parent wants it. And all we could really do is let them know why we recommend what we're clinically recommending, and then leave it out on the table. Like, have you thought about maybe doing it this way, like Junie said? But it's a tough conversation. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So I want to move us out of the IEP process because our offer of FATE has to be based on what the kids need. So I don't want to get into the negotiating of what goes in that someone might not think is a treatment that should be appropriate, because only those goals and only those treatments and services should be put in. And that's where directors and teachers say, gosh, we got to agree to disagree sometimes. So we don't just put in IEPs unless it actually belongs in them. So let's get back onto our PowerPoint, if that helps, and get into some of those questions. Thank you so much.
I appreciate your question, Christian. And did you want to take this one, Junie? Or I can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I can take this one.
Okay, awesome.
All right. So again, talking a lot about behavior, talking about, we engage in behaviors, our students engage in behaviors because they work for us. But what does that mean? There's 4 functions of behavior. So the first one up here, attention seeking. Does the child get attention, or do we get attention when he or she engage in this behavior? Is it maintained? Is it functioning for attention? Another function, tangibles, access to things or activities. Does the child get access to a desired item or activity when he or she engages in this behavior? You can ask yourself that. Third, escape or avoidance. Does the child get out of or delay something that they don't love when they engage in the behavior? Fourth, self-stimulatory behavior, also more commonly known as sensory. Does the child engage in this behavior because it feels good or it just relieves some kind of pain? Like my example earlier with I had a headache and I engaged in the behavior of taking some ibuprofen. That's the 4th function.
So I'll talk about attention-seeking behaviors, which we see so often in the classroom, of course. So what is the payoff of these behaviors? Often parents, teachers, siblings, peers is providing some kind of attention, which might be positive or negative attention. Some forms of these that we commonly see in the classroom is head turns. So I always think of the class clown who is, saying something inappropriate and all the peers look their way. Or facial expressions, even eye contact, reprimands, telling the child, hey, cut it out, or whatever it might be, is a form of attention. Attempts to soothe, counsel, or distract. These are all different forms of attention. The key here is that reinforcement is provided by another person. So another person needs to be present, delivering the reinforcement. And why does it increase or maintain? Likely because it continues to be followed by attention. It works for them. They get what they're looking for. And how do we decrease it? So the behavior is likely to decrease when attention is withheld following the problem behavior, which can be hard in the classroom. So we can talk about that. It's not like we can prompt all the kids not to take a look at what's going on in the back of the class with the class clown. So we can talk about that as well. So let's talk about some tips for managing attention-seeking behaviors. So first of all, we would want to give them proactive attention. So we know they want attention. So before they have the opportunity to engage in the problem behavior, as an antecedent strategy, we will give them high quality attention before, maybe like in the morning when we greet them, when they come to class, and intermittently throughout the day. Be aware. So we would be aware of the responses given to the student immediately following the behavior. The individual or the child continues to engage in attention-seeking behavior because in the past, it resulted in attention. So kind of watching ourselves and others and observing how everyone is responding is key here. We also will be very specific. So we would choose our words wisely so that you are very clearly providing attention and acknowledgement for the exact behavior you would like to see more of. So if that child who is acting as a class clown and often says inappropriate things or whatever it might be, when they do engage in a behavior we want to see more of, maybe raising their hand and saying, and calling your name appropriately, we would give them high quality, specific attention and let them know, hey, Johnny, that was a really awesome way to get my attention. And of course, wanting and needing attention is normal for all of us. We all seek attention in some fashion. We all engage in attention-seeking behaviors. Attention is one of the most powerful reinforcers we can receive. So it's really important to teach how and when to do so appropriately. Can you guys think of any attention-seeking behaviors you engage in yourselves? If anyone would like to share. I engage in attention-seeking behaviors all day long. I send emails. Of course, I say my husband's name. I'm like, hey, Marcus. Or I'll say to my child, hey, play with me. Those are ways of gaining attention from others.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm a talker. I like to talk, and sometimes I feel like I might almost interrupt people or not let them finish what their thought is. So I try to consciously think about that, but I like to definitely talk throughout the day. And I'm not as well of a listener, but yes.
I feel like in this day and age, we all sort of get that attention also from social media.
Yes.
Big one.
There's that validation process of when you post the things and you're like, oh, so many people liked this.
Right.
This is great.
Oh my goodness, that's a good one, Christina.
Huge. That's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So let's practice this. So we kind of did this already. So we all do things to get someone's attention. I will post like a picture on Instagram because I want attention from my friends. So if it did not work, what would you do in the future to get that person's attention? So what if, let's say you're calling a friend and they never answer. maybe in the future, would you change your behavior, or do you think you would continue to call them even though they never answer the phone? What do you think?
Probably change it. You probably wouldn't call them as often, or you might text them too. You could always
Right.
shoot a text like, so they read it, hey, you're not answering my phone calls, what's going on?
You might try something different, right? Because making a phone call wasn't working for you to get their attention. Maybe they're more of a texter kind of person.
Lee said the same thing in the chat. He said he would email or text them.
Oh, awesome. A lot of people don't like to be on the phone anymore. Would you like to take this one, Junie?
Sure. Okay, so going into another function, access to tangibles. The payoff, or how does it work for you? You're accessing a preferred item or activity. Some examples could be food, drinks, toys, games, friends, outings, going on vacation, locations. Reinforcement is provided by another person. Why these behaviors increase or maintain over time? The behavior is likely to increase when it is followed by access to the desired item or activity. How to decrease it? Behavior is likely to decrease when access to the desired item or activity is withheld following the problem behavior. An example I can think of is I always want to go on some kind of vacation. How am I maintaining that? Well, I have to go to work, I have to make some money, and then I can buy a plane ticket, and then I'm going to go. How to decrease it? Well, maybe it just didn't happen for me a couple months in a row and couldn't buy that plane ticket, so it wasn't able to maintain. Thanks, Mo.
Yes.
Tips for managing access behaviors. Don't be negatively reinforced. Caregivers often provide access following these behaviors. So think problem behaviors. So like, for example, a child screams every time they want a snack, or every time they want a toy, every time they want your attention. And that screaming just drives you nuts. So every time you hear it, they're going to get what they want because you can't handle it. You can't deal with it. So following these behaviors, because it stops the negative behavior from occurring. For example, a kid cries for candy and mom gives candy to stop crying in the grocery store, like my example earlier. Although the behavior is stopped temporarily, it can really have the opposite effect. It can make the behavior more likely to occur in the future under similar circumstances because it worked last time. So instead of that, don't do that. Instead, we want to look at replacement behaviors. What is an appropriate way for the child to gain access to what they want? Maybe they can use their words. Teach that and give access when the appropriate behavior is used. Instead of that tantrum working, using their words is going to work.
And you have to really, sorry, Junie, to interrupt, but some kids can't use their words. They're not there. So you have to, as Junie said, I think previously, meet people where they're at. You have to identify what is currently in their skill set and start there and start reinforcing that. So sometimes the replacement behavior isn't going to be to say, I want candy. It's not going to even be to put it to use a picture for candy or put it on a communication device or anything like that. Maybe it's just going to be a point. And if they're doing that instead of the tantrum, you will give them the candy, right? And then you shape it up very systematically. Teachers, we get negatively reinforced all the time because that one child having the behavior is not the only child in the classroom. It is not the same as when we go in and work in a home one-on-one with a child. You sometimes have to, or feel you have to, negatively reinforce in order to keep the rest of the classroom or the day moving efficiently. So we recognize that is why, as I think Lee said in the chat, tantrums and challenging behaviors get worse and worse. And that's part of what we want to help support everybody in being really, really mindful of. And it's super hard. And as Kristen mentions in the chat, it's very difficult to push through and teach the appropriate behavior because it's a process, right? The child, you're not just like, hey, do this instead. And they're like, okay, why didn't I think of that? And then they go and do it. Like, that's not how it works. There's a skill you have to teach. You have to prompt and then fade prompts. They have to learn to trust that contingency, that if I engage in this behavior, think of a child who has a very difficult time communicating, right? Lots of speech and language delays. How hard is it going to be for them to say, I want candy, right? Probably a lot harder at first than it is for them to throw a tantrum, especially if the tantrum has gotten them candy in the past. Mm-hmm. So it is difficult, Kristen, you're right. And
that was me. I'm on Kristen's computer. She had to leave.
Oh, that was you. Okay.
Yes.
Yep. You're right, Noelle. You're right.
But it's just, as a parent and I consider myself a teacher. I'm a para, but I do teach preschool. One of the things I feel like, and why it gets looked at as a negative, because when you're pushing, so you tell your child, say you're in the store, and you say, no, I'm not giving you the candy. And that child is freaking out because they want that candy. Say you have a stubborn child too, on top of that, which I do have. And they say, but I want that candy, and they keep crying, but you don't give them that candy, but it looks like, it almost looks like you're beating that child, right? At that point, because you're like, you're not going to give in, you're adamant. I think that what I've observed when we do have behavior specialists come in, we're very, you're not going to give in to that child's behaviors, and you're going to push for them to do whatever it is, just going back to the classroom, say, and you can't get that child back to the classroom, but they're upset and they're going to fight you on it. So a lot of times I think people have a negative view because they see that child and then their behaviors increase at the moment. But then you see when you give it that time, it's able to, and that work and that real, that dedication to, helping that child, then you see the behaviors decrease, and so that's a big thing I've observed, and why I think sometimes people have, like, Lake County schools have been great, but I think in the past, like you were saying, Danielle, that it's been hard to work as a team with the behavior specialists, because in the beginning of it, you see the beginning stage, and you see them really, especially with a child that's not only has disabilities, but maybe is stubborn on top to boot, right? Because every child's different. But then it's like, once you see it applied and you're able to push through, then you see the success of it. Just like the child in the store. Well, they're not going to ask every time for a candy. Or that maybe they use their words instead of freaking out, screaming when, or whatever it is, or you go, okay, well, if you can act appropriately for, 2 weeks in the store, and then, maybe you could get the candy, something like that, in those terms, in that sense.
Right. And what you're talking about, we have a whole slide on it. It's called an extinction burst, and it's an actual technical thing in the science of human behavior that is, I would argue, probably a rite of passage if you're trying to decrease the behavior. I would say that probably every time you're going to get some scale of an extinction burst. And we'll talk more about it, but what it basically means is that behavior is going to temporarily get way worse before it gets way better. Mm-hmm. So you have to get kind of over that hump. And that is where meetings like this and collaboration like this is so freaking awesome, because if you do it like this, everybody's on the same page and we're all in this together.
Right.
Versus and we see it a lot with like divorced parents, right? Like one caregiver is digging in and saying, no, I'm going to see this through and we're going to follow through on this. The other parent is not. So if that child is sometimes going to get that candy for tantruming, they're going to try it every time. They might as well, because sometimes they get it. What the heck, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you're never going to see a behavior decrease if you're not consistent. And
you have to be consistent.
The other thing too is that oh my God, where was I going with that?
You said an extinction burst,
like a behavior burst. Like, because what happens is that child's like, well, I cried in the store and I whined for the candy bar and I didn't get it. So mom's saying no. So maybe I should scream really loud. She's still not giving it to me. Maybe I should fall on the floor. No, maybe I should kick her. Maybe I should knock all the cans off the shelf. Maybe I should, right? And it eventually, they're just exhausting every option, trying to get access to that thing that they need and communicate their desire. Because remember, all behavior is communication. So it's not that they're just giving a hard time right there in the middle of the store and I'll show mom. You know, it's not like that. It's, you might have kids like that, like you said, who are naturally stubborn, but behaviorally speaking, that's not the function of their behavior. They're trying to communicate how badly they want or feel they need this thing, right? But this is what parents, I'm guilty of it, do all the time.
We all are.
And I know teachers do it too, and all practitioners do because we're human, right? We're like, we're not giving in. Nope. And we let it get all the way to the top, that peak of that extinction burst. And then we're like, I cannot take it. And we give in. So that child just learned that he doesn't get it at 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. He gets it at 60. So what's he going to do next time? He's going to go from 0 to 60.
Right.
That's the fastest way to get it because it worked last time. And that's that learning history that we really want to look at.
Well, and I think when we're out and about and say we're at the store and as a parent, you know, you don't want people seeing your child freaking out. You don't, you know, it's embarrassing. You're like, oh my gosh, I've taken my kids out of the store before. I've literally left my shopping cart like, nope.
Same.
You know, my son's 10 now and my daughter is 4. So I'm like, but they're on a good age range and beat and all that. But I've left the store. I'm like, I'm not doing this. I cannot. Or a restaurant.
Yep.
And
I've done that.
I think as the parent and even parents that have children with these disabilities, right? It's kind of when they see their child upset like that, it's hard. It's difficult,
Absolutely.
You know. They want to put a Band-Aid on it. They want to make them feel better. And so, or they don't want the behaviors to happen. They're dealing with it every day throughout the entire day, the whole night, you know, like just their whole life, right? And so it's hard. And then it's hard to see their behaviors getting so bad that they're getting so upset that their child's so, you know, just distraught when they're working through that. And so I could see both sides of it.
Absolutely. And in a classroom, it's could be even harder because now you have the safety of every other children and staff member in that classroom to worry about. So I just want to be very clear about this. There are behaviors that we cannot let get to extinction burst because they are too dangerous. These would be the self-injurious behaviors. They're harming themselves, they're harming others, they're dangerous to other students in the classroom. And then it's a very individualized behavior plan. But it is really hard to see a problem behavior through to extinction in a classroom because of all those other variables. And I just want to be super clear that we are never going to be recommending that you do whatever it takes at the risk of the safety of other people in the classroom.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Checkpoint. I think we kind of just did this, but we could do it again. Yeah. Can anybody share something that you do in order to get something that you want? Anything? Any ideas? Lee said, ask for it. Yeah. So yeah, using your words, asking for it. You want it, you ask for it, you got it. Now, if that didn't work, what would you do in the future to get it? What's something else that might work? Maybe you asked, other person says, no way, you can't have that. What are you going to do next?
I whine at my children.
Yeah, me too.
I do. Please, can you just please make mom some tea? Please.
I whine to my husband for sure when I need more coffee and I need him to bring it to me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you ever go around one person and ask a different person?
Right. And they
answer?
say, what about you?
Yeah,
go get it yourself. Yes. Yeah.
So self-stimulatory behaviors, or we also call them sometimes automatically reinforced behaviors or stimming. The payoff is that it feels good or it removes pain. So these behaviors provide some kind of sensory reinforcement. So like scratching an itch. Forms of self-stimulatory behaviors include thumb sucking, leg tapping, pen tapping, which I'm doing constantly all the time, getting your own food to alleviate hunger, humming, taking Tylenol to relieve a headache. We all engage in stimming behavior. Common ones that we see with autistic children is hand clapping or hand flapping, finger biting, jumping, teeth grinding, vocalizations, and other repetitive behaviors. And under these conditions, the reinforcement is provided solely by one's own self. So they'll do this even if no one else is around. They might be, by themselves in their room, and they might engage in some of these behaviors. So it's difficult. These are very difficult behaviors to change sometimes because the reinforcement can be accessed anytime. So they don't need us. They don't rely on another person to access their hand flapping or spinning or jumping behavior. If a behavior is occurring even when the person is alone, it is very likely that it is an automatically reinforced behavior. It increases because it is allowed to continue, and that's why it maintains as well. And if we choose to decrease it, which we may or may not, a self-stimulatory behavior is okay if it's not impacting anyone negatively. But if we choose to treat a behavior, then it's likely to decrease when the problematic self-stimulatory behavior is blocked, and very importantly, a replacement behavior that offers the same sensory reinforcement is used and allowed to continue. So the example here is, instead of teeth grinding, which can be very problematic for some of our older kids, if they're grinding their teeth too much and it's causing dental harm, we need to address it. And sometimes offering them a chewy might help, or offering intermittent some kind of snack or something else appropriate that they are allowed to chew on might be used as a replacement skill. The behavior can also be decreased by offering access to sensory stimulating activities or a sensory diet. They can be, so for instance, allowing 5 minutes of trampoline jumping every hour to reduce jumping during class when they need to be paying attention. We'll give them, before that time when we want them to sit a little more still and pay better attention, we'll give them access to jumping in a more appropriate way. And we only target these behaviors if it's a barrier to learning or if it's somehow dangerous to others. So some tips for managing these behaviors is we often consult an occupational therapist about a sensory diet. We love consulting with occupational therapists for these specific types of behaviors. They usually have wonderful replacement behaviors that we can teach the child to engage in. We also want the child to have these replacements readily available. So if a child feels, okay, I really need to jump right now, them knowing, okay, the trampoline is right there, I'm going to go jump over there, or fidget toys and things like that. So having them easily available so we can easily redirect them to that activity is ideal. We also often teach a time and place. So we all, like I said, we all engage in self-stimulatory behavior all the time. I'm sure some of you are right now. You might notice if you concentrate for a second on your body and your behavior currently. So it's important to teach when and where to appropriately get those needs met. So with some of our kids, we might teach them, hey, you can go to the back of the classroom and jump, as long if it's not distracting to others. We might give them like a jumping break, or in the home, we might tell them, okay, you can engage in this behavior, but go into your room, okay? So what is something you're maybe even doing now or in general that you engage in that might be a self-stimulatory behavior? Can you think of anything?
I
My
doodle.
husband complains.
I doodle during
Oh, go
my
ahead.
meetings. I
You,
jot notes, but I doodle.
I do too. I doodle as well. Yes. That's a really good one.
Anybody
Anyone else?
with their hair?
Oh gosh, I play with my hair usually too. I'm trying not to. I do that as well.
Tapping.
Lee said tapping my feet.
What about some of the kiddos that you guys work with?
Right.
Any self-stimulatory behaviors that you have found to be like disruptive or dangerous?
Vocalizations, loud vocalizations. I'd say more disruptive than dangerous, right? But one thing we've done throughout school is having like one of those fizzy little waters, because our students are allowed to have water in the classroom. There's certain things like we can't be snacking in the classroom. That's one of the school policies, especially with COVID, has added some different challenges. But we can snack at recess time. So that's one thing that's been, shown to our students, like, okay, well, all the students, we all have to snack at recess. Or if there's high vocalizations, giving that fizzy soda tends to help a little bit. Or it's not soda, it's water, but that's one thing we can do because it is a water, and they're allowed to have water in their classrooms.
Okay. Lee said self-injurious behaviors like headbanging to get some stimulation. We have one or two OTs on this call.
Oh,
right?
Wonderful.
Does
That's great.
any of you, and I don't mean to just put you on the spot, so feel free to type it in the chat or not, but if anybody wants to come on and chat about that, we are very careful to not practice outside of our scope. We do a functional analysis or functional assessment to determine if any of those sensory behaviors are truly, everything's a behavior, everything we do, but truly behavioral in nature, meaning that maybe that child actually bangs his head to get attention, right? And we can teach a functional replacement behavior. But if it really is a sensory thing, that becomes a little outside of our scope and a little more into OT scope. And that's why that collaboration is so important.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. We'll pick your brains later, OTs.
Yeah.
Shout it out anytime. Okay. Escape behaviors. What's the payoff? Getting out of something, avoiding something that we don't want to do. We all do it, right? Some examples, telemarketers call you and you hang up as soon as you realize who it is. You don't finish that call. Staying seated on the couch when the doorbell rings. I know I do this. When someone's out there that you don't want to talk to. Tantruming when it's time to leave the park so that you can get 5 or 10 more minutes maybe of playtime. Finding chores to do instead of writing a paper postpones the paper writing. Problem behaviors are maintained in the same way, things like aggression and self-injurious behaviors. Children typically develop escape behaviors due to difficult or unpleasant tasks, activities, or interactions. They don't like it, or maybe it's just difficult, it's challenging. How they increase or maintain, these behaviors are likely to increase when the person is allowed to get out of completing the task directly following the problem behavior. How do we decrease it? Behavior is likely to decrease when there's follow through with the assigned task or instruction. Thanks, Mo. Tips for managing these kinds of behaviors. Number one, understanding the MO to work. What do you want to work for? You've got a kiddo that just does not enjoy doing their table work. What do you want to work for? Cool, you want that piece of candy? Let's do one worksheet, first the worksheet, and then here's your candy. Establish that motivation. Help pair that super exciting, yummy candy with something that they don't love so that they can learn over time. I can do things that I don't love. I can do hard things too, because at the end, I can get access to something that I do love. So understanding the MO is super important. Number 2, teach replacement behaviors. Teach your child ways he or she can appropriately put off the undesirable activity. Like, let's teach you to ask for a break. Use the first and then contingency. First this one worksheet, buddy, and then we've got this candy ready and waiting for you. First the worksheet and then the candy. Always deliver on your promise. So that's super important. If I tell you first one worksheet and then candy, let's give the candy. We said what we would do, let's do it. Follow through during unwanted behaviors. So maybe first the worksheet and then the candy, halfway through the worksheet and that tantrum hits, right? First the worksheet and then the candy, buddy. I gotcha. I'm going to stay right here with you, but we're going to finish this and then I got your candy. What you don't want to do is remember that negative reinforcement. We don't want to say, man, tantrum. Well, they did half. You did half, bud. Good job. Here you go. Let's follow through. Let's get that whole worksheet done. So let's practice. What is something you do or something that a student that you can think of does to get out of something that you don't want to do?
Do preferred things first.
What was that? I think my connection cut out for a second. I'm sorry.
I'll actually sometimes not do a preferred, non-preferred, preferred. I'll go preferred. I'll do it tomorrow morning.
I do that too all the time. Yes.
I'll take that one on too.
Yep. I'll get to it when I get to it. Anybody else?
I usually have them do the thing they hate the most first so that the reward is at the end. I do that with myself too.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work so well to say first the worksheet and then the candy. Sometimes it's more like first this worksheet that's a little harder, and then we got this color sheet. We're going to do both. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
That's excellent.
I don't know if I should be saying this out loud, but writing reports is like my least favorite part of the job. So if I have a report that I need to do, I'm like, oh my gosh, look how many dishes are in the sink. Oh, I have to put this laundry away. You know, I haven't spent time with my kids all day. I better go out and play with them. Oh my gosh, look how many the garage is. I better clean that up, right? There's all these things that I do in order to avoid that least preferred task, which is writing the report. But guess what? There's a deadline and I have to do it. So at a certain point, doing the dishes, doing all of that does not get me out of writing that report. I cannot avoid it or delay it. So my behavior as a result is to just do the dang report, right? If I put it off, and then the person I was submitting it to was like, you know what? Don't worry about it. I don't need it anyway. I'm really likely to engage in all of that kind of distracted avoidance behavior again in the future because it got me out of the task. If it doesn't get me out of the task, I'm not going to try it. So it's the same for the students that we work with, right? If they like, I see this a lot in classrooms. I don't know why this is like the favorite. They'll push away from the desk and they like get under the table, right? Or they like fall to the floor. And if you are saying, here's one that happens often, and I want you guys to keep in mind that I'm not talking about a child who's engaging in a dangerous behavior, because that is always an outlier kind of unique situation, right? But something like that where they're like kind of eloping a little bit, like but within the classroom, or like they're under the desk and the teacher's like, go to the office, right? Your punishment for doing this is going to the office. And the kid's like, heck yeah, I didn't want to do no worksheet anyway. Now I get to go sit in the office. That's freaking awesome, right? So what he or she just did totally worked. So what is that child going to do next time you give him a worksheet he doesn't want to do? He's going to do what worked last time. He's going to fall under that desk because they're going to send him to the principal's office and then he's going to get out of it. That's a bit of a drastic example, but that does happen where where kids get kind of put on like a timeout, or they get removed from the environment, not necessarily for safety reasons, but just as like what the adult thinks is a punishment, just because not knowing any better, right? Or trying to make life easier for themselves and the other students in the classroom. And we've just actually reinforced that problem behavior. If it didn't work and it was like, oh yeah, you're not going anywhere or doing anything until you finish this, you could sit under that desk all day. But when all the other kids go out to lunch, you're not going with them unless, or go out to play or whatever, you're not going with them unless you do whatever I told you to do on this, whatever you're expected to do on this worksheet. They're less likely to engage in that again. Yes, Lee says suspension. I've never understood that, although I do kind of get why, but it's, you engage in a problem behavior as, say, a teenager, right? Doing teenage things, and they get suspended for ditching school. Students used to get suspended for ditching class, and it's like, wait, you just gave them the very exact thing that they wanted, right?
Party's on.
Party's on.
Yeah, my daughter recently, she'll offer to help me with gardening to get out of homework. She knows that I'm very likely going to say, oh, that's amazing. Sure, yes. And successfully gets out of homework until like the morning before school. So all of us engage in some kind of escape behavior. So here's some scenarios we'd love to talk about where I'd love for you guys to try and determine what the function might be. So this scenario is Kevin is on the carpet. He's playing with Legos. His teacher says, Kevin, sit down. Let me make you guys smaller. It's time to do centers. He runs to the other side of the room with his toys and continues to play with the Legos. His teacher follows him and repeats, it's time to do centers, let's go. He screams, throws his Legos at the wall saying, I'm playing Legos right now. I will do centers later. So his teacher says, okay, you can play, but you need to promise to do centers later or after. His teacher becomes very frustrated over time because Kevin runs away and then negotiates every time she asks him to do center. So I'd love to hear from some of you what might the function be of this? Any ideas? I can't see the chat, Daniel.
Nothing yet, but just a reminder, the 4 functions we talked about were attention, right? Access to something, escape or avoidance for something, and then that sensory.
I think he just did, Daniel, I think he just did, he escaped what the teacher wanted him to do because of his toys that he wanted. So I think that it's more than just one there. It's multiple.
I love that. We do often see dual functions, of course, with the behavior that the topography or what it looks like is the same. So sometimes a child might scream because they're trying to escape something. Sometimes they might scream, engage in the exact same behavior because they want something. Scream because of sensory overload. So yeah, this is a tricky one. I love your answer. I do think you could look at this 2 different ways, or maybe both are a function in this one. I think it's probably mostly escape. He's trying to get out of those centers because I see here he throws his Legos at the wall, so he doesn't even have those anymore. But he might also want, increased access to those toys. So I think you're right. What do you guys think? Junie and Danielle.
Yeah, Susan in the chat says task avoidance. Oh, and she said might need transition time, 2 minutes, choices at center time. Yeah, so you're talking about some antecedent strategies. That's so good. You're 5 steps ahead of us.
I was gonna say I agree with her too on that. If the teacher would have gave the child 2 to 3 minutes of transition, okay, this is what we're doing in 3 minutes, and set a timer, I bet you he would have reacted differently.
Yeah,
totally. You guys are way ahead of us. Yes.
As Mo said, we see dual functions a lot, and this is a perfect example where we could see that, right? So the function is to avoid a transition to a less preferred activity, but it's also because he still wants access to those Legos. So you might hear, someone on the behavior team talk about a primary function and a secondary function, and there's a bit of a science on how that's figured out, which you'll learn more about for sure.
Sorry, it won't change slides for me. Sorry, one second. Let me try again.
All right.
Oh, there we go. All right. So the second scenario, so during free choice, Tori is sitting at the table rolling Play-Doh with a roller. She has an assortment of Play-Doh tools available at the table. There's no other students at the table. The teacher and the 2 classroom aides are at the other areas of the classroom working with Tori's classmates. And Tori begins throwing Play-Doh toys. Her teacher sees this and continues helping another student with a toy he is building. Tori then stands up and emits a scream. Then an aide notices and tells Tori, "I'll be right there." And Tori then stands on the table and screams again. The aide rushes to the table and tells Tori to get down, asking what is wrong. Tori picks up the Play-Doh star she made and shows the aide. So the aide tells Tori what a pretty star she made. Any idea what the function of this one might be from anyone?
Attention seeking.
Yes.
Yes. So Tori definitely wants that attention from the teacher. She wasn't getting it by throwing the Play-Doh toys. She finally started, try to scream. That kind of worked out for her, and then she screamed again, and that really did work out for her. Maybe she doesn't have the skill yet to ask for attention appropriately. So we would take a close look at that to make sure that she has the skill set. Speaking of, so replacement behaviors. So we always, when we treat a behavior for a decrease, we always will treat a behavior for increase as well, or teach a behavior that's not currently within the skill set of that child. We want the replacement behaviors to allow the student to receive or escape something in a socially appropriate and functional way. So replacement behaviors must serve the same function as the problem behavior. They must have the same payoff. So in that previous example with her screaming to get attention, we would teach her how to get attention appropriately. Replacement behaviors must require same or less effort to engage in that problem behavior they are replacing. And that's why we try to find something in the child's repertoire that we can use that's more appropriate, that will get them the same reinforcement that they're looking for. So the purpose is that the individual engages in the replacement behavior instead of the problem behavior under similar conditions. And that replacement behavior, we will give tons of reinforcement to. We'll give them the same reinforcement they were previously accessing through the problem behavior. Would you like to take this one, Junie?
Yes, sure. All right, so let's practice a little bit. Back to scenario number 1 with Kevin and his Legos. So Kevin is avoiding his centers like we talked about last time. He's avoiding those centers. And he also, in addition to that, is super wanting to play with his Legos. What might be some replacement behaviors for Kevin? What do we think? What are some behaviors that we could teach Kevin that will allow him to meet all of the same needs, but are more appropriate and also functional?
If Kevin was a student in your classroom, what would you like Kevin to do instead of throwing the Legos?
Thanks, Danielle. Ask for more time with the Legos. Absolutely. That's a great one.
That's a really good one.
Any other ideas?
So sometimes we've seen students who can't ask for more time. And also the question always comes up of like, how much time is too much time to like we don't have all day, right? Like we have to eventually transition. So I've seen like more time cards, right? So like little Velcro, and it's like 5 little clocks, right? So maybe the student has the ability to peel a Velcro clock off and hand it and ask for more time. Even a student with some vocal language could do that and see, I only have 5 of these clocks. So maybe each one's a minute, right? It's a 1 more minute clock. And then after those, you've used all 5, then you have to transition. Susan says maybe not allow him to play with Legos until he's completed all of his work.
Yeah, great one. If we think back to a couple of slides ago when we were talking about escape maintained behaviors originally, how we hit on MOs or motivation, you're hitting on it, Susan, because yeah, we can totally take advantage. Do you want to work for those Legos? Let's go do your worksheet. You can work for your Legos. First worksheet and then some Legos.
That's right. Sorry, real quick, it is 4:01 and we only have till 4 o'clock, right, Beth?
And what's really great is we have school psychologists, we have speech teachers, we have teachers, we have instructional assistants, we have other related service providers. So we have all of the experts. So we do have those people who write FBAs and train those FBAs and do that piece. And we do have that speech piece. So it's really exciting to have this behavior piece brought in.
Perfect. It's exciting for us too, because every time we collaborate, right, guys, with a speech therapist or an OP or a school psych or OT or a school psych, anything like that, we learn so much.
Yes.
So
Yes, absolutely.
It takes the village.
It does. Deborah's asking if this is going to be a weekly thing. We will definitely be doing it next week on, is it Thursday or Friday? I can't remember. It's the 7th, whatever day that is. It's Friday, next Friday at 2:30.
I was gonna say, gosh, we just had our calendar in here for like doing next year. So we took over another hallway and we're like, wait, it was just hanging there a minute ago. And I looked at a blank wall. Thank you.
No worries. Guys, it was so great to be here. Thank you so much, Junie and Mo. Thank you guys. Your expertise is super valued. Thanks, Beth, for having us.
Thank you so much for this presentation was incredibly thoughtfully prepared. These are incredibly great materials. You're dynamic and we appreciate you coming in and so looking forward to next week. And we'll make sure we do the PR again with everything to say traffic people to you. And again, bringing kids back to with the COVID and being back in school, all of our partners couldn't participate, but this is fabulous and thank you very much.